Hello and welcome to Our Time. If you'd grown up in the rather grey city of Birmingham in the UK, watching Neighbours on TV and dreamed of the sun and the sea Australia represented on the show, you'd definitely want to come to an exotic country on the other side of the globe, wouldn't you? Well, that's exactly what happened to Dan Sherwood, and he's our guest. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Malcolm.
Thanks for coming on and talking to us, because that's a true sort of description as to what happened to you, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
What actually did you think? Did you think it was going to be like that 12 months of the year? The Neighbours story?
Kind of. I mean, we sort of watched Bondi Rescue and those great Aussie TV shows. We export the image of Australia quite well, I think. And
we now, see,
I am a local. Now. It's been a decade. I'm
10 years,
a citizen and a local. Yes, so it was a no-brainer for us. It was a very dark, particularly dark, rainy winter in the UK. I don't think we'd seen the sun for about 6 months, and me and my wife got this glimmer of sun come through the clouds, and we sat in our tiny little deck, and we said, right, we've got to make some changes, and that's what we did. We high-fived to the decision, and we went, where shall we go? And I glibly said Australia, and that was it.
Well, it's lovely that you've been here and that you've established what you've established, and that's what we're going to talk about. But before we do, let's talk about you, because I love shots of people when they were young, and we've got some of you when you were quite young.
Yep, all sent over by Mum, yeah.
Oh, okay. Like this one here. Look, how old are you there?
I'm about 2 there, very cheeky.
Were you musical then?
Yeah, look, it's probably before my first memory, but my first memory is of listening to I Know an Old Woman Who Swallowed a Fly. I had this little cassette recorder that I took with me everywhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was...
Well, you graduated obviously to this. What's this?
So that was my guitar, which obviously... very, very cool.
Yes, of course.
With the semi-bowl haircut there.
Yes, and with one knee up slightly as if you're really grooving.
That's exactly right. I was quite the dancer.
You progressed to this one.
Yeah, that's my first day of school, so I would have been about 5, something like that.
Right. I love it. So, Dan, what's that around your neck?
That is the infamous cassette player. Remember those?
Yes, I do. I actually remember records.
I've now got a record
even 78s.
Player. Yeah, I had a couple of those as a kid too. So I had one cassette, only one. I Know an Old Lady That Swallowed a Fly, and I listened to that thing. And the one day it ran out of batteries, and I went up to my dad and I said, "Hey, look, can you fix my problem for me?" Tears. And so he thought he wasn't a handyman, and he thought it'd be a great idea to connect this tiny thing to the mains voltage, and blew the thing to smithereens. And that was probably my first memory, actually, of music.
Oh, really?
Or the absence of it, somewhat.
So when did you think, I really want to play here?
Yeah, probably around that time. So I was probably 4, 5, something like that.
And why, was it keyboard first for you?
It was the piano/electric organ.
Okay, well, keyboard, yes.
Yeah, so I went into an antique store, actually, is the story, and there was this dusty piano that they'd got there for sale, and I was convinced it was mine. And I went up to it and, gingerly pressed a key, and the shop lady sort of looked at me sternly as if to say to my mum, "What are you doing, letting him touch the piano?"
Touch the antique.
That, of course. And yeah, Mum said I could have one, but I'd need to take lessons. So the rest is history in that way.
But isn't that interesting? Because not everybody knows that they have an aptitude to play an instrument, but those that actually do, it just seems to be like osmosis comes into you. Sure, you've got to practice and stuff, but then the light goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that people are naturally gifted. I know that's somewhat contentious. I suppose as a teacher, I believe that you can reach every soul. It's just a case of finding...
I think some people find it easier than others, perhaps.
Possibly. Maybe certain brain structures are, lend themselves to learning. I think it does matter if you start as a kid. I think it is easier.
I think it is too.
Although, having said that, the amount of adults that I teach that pick up concepts a lot quicker because you've got the ability to explain the concept.
Yeah, but that's
more
a concept
straightforwardly.
rather than making
Correct.
the fingers move in the right place.
Yeah, the
isn't
finger
it?
muscle memory is, of course, easier
very
if you
much so.
start at a very
Yeah.
young age. Yeah.
So just go through all your studies. So did you go to like a local lady teaching piano, or
I
was there an
did, and
actual
then my
school?
first ever lesson, and I got whacked on the hands, and I never went back there.
Okay.
But that's
Those days have gone with teaching, fortunately.
Very much so, yeah. So then I went to a music school called Octaves in Warsaw. That was my hometown. And stayed there for the best part of, so it was like 5 till about 15. And then, moved on to a couple
But then
of
you
teaching.
started performing.
Yes, of course, yeah.
We've got a shot of you here that I think is lovely, in a costume that is overwhelming almost.
Yes.
What's the story here?
What you don't see there is the black leather pants, which I promise you were a real challenge to get on and off. That was me at 16, so in high school. The part of Blondell, which is a Stephen Oliver musical.
Right.
Of the same title, Blondell.
Were you blondish then?
I was blonder than I am.
Yes, yes, quite. So you're playing keys, you're now starting to perform. Now, cut to the chase a long time later, you're doing all of this again. But let's look at the other photos that we've got here, because some of these are really cute, I think. This is your family now?
It is, yeah. We did. My daughter's on the left-hand side there. We did not have. We only had my daughter 18 months old when we came to Australia.
Right.
And now
so
we've
they've
got
all grown
3.
up now.
Well, so Helen and
Sort
my
of.
oldest is 12,
Yeah.
and the others are 6 and 18 months.
Yep. So it's lovely that the families come over. Do they love being here, or do they remember back in the UK much?
Look, I look on the UK very fondly. You know, it's obviously my stomping ground as a kid, and you know, you remember those early adult memories / late teenage memories very fondly. But Australia's a beautiful place, geographically beautiful. We live in Moana, which is one of the most stunning places on earth, I think.
And we're safe here. We're pretty safe in
Yes.
this country,
Oh,
which is
correct.
great if you're bringing up kids. And they've got a lot of space to roam around.
That's right.
Particularly where you are.
We spend 2 months of every year on the beach, recharging, in the school holidays. You know.
Yeah, fantastic. But really the reason that we're talking to you is because you are also a music teacher. That's your so-called day job.
Yep.
But with the Fringe coming up, you've put together a major piece of entertainment for the Fringe. Yep. Where did this sort of start off? Was that back in the musical that we saw the photo of, or?
So I've always loved musicals, and I've always known that I wanted to do something at some stage.
Did you do much performing back in the UK before?
Yeah, I was in several musicals in the UK.
Playing or being on stage, being a character?
Both, yeah.
Right.
So being on stage and in the pit and all around hotels and bars and clubs and as a pianist.
So your experience in this area is quite vast, in actual fact.
Yep. But I've always taught as well since I was 16, and I don't know how much my first student learned when I was 16, but, but you learn on the job, you know.
Well, you sort of do, yeah, because if you can already play, you've got something to teach.
Yeah, and I think actually the best part of being a good teacher is actually being a chameleon, which is not unlike being an actor or an actress. You've got to be able to reach everyone.
Yes, you've got to find I always use the expression, you've got to find the key to the door to open it.
Correct. And often that's things in common. And it's been a really interesting learning experience as I've got older to try and continue to find those things in common with younger kids. And I suppose you put more of a parental spin on it as you get older. It was a lot easier when I was sort of 18 or something like that. But so yes, I've got that experience.
So if you have a child, or you're of an age that you've always wanted to play a keyboard, what's the best advice you could give? Find a good teacher.
Yeah.
Get a keyboard at home to
start
practice.
early, get a keyboard, because the amount of students that we don't take on because mum and dad say, well, we'll see how they go with lessons, see if they find it interesting. But you've got to capitalise on that initial interest.
Because if you don't start practicing...
Well, the first few lessons it's new, and so we want to, as I said, we want to capitalise on that novelty, and because that's when they're going to
Making a noise. Yeah.
right? And it also coincides with when it's hardest, because you're going from knowing nothing to having to know quite a bit actually just to get started. So to get through that, 2 to 3 week boring period, as it were, we want to capitalise on that novelty, and then they're away, and you can get them playing songs straight away.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, we're going to come back in a moment. We're talking to Dan about a show that he's creating for the Adelaide Fringe, and we'll do that after this short break. Dan Sherwood is our very special guest on this episode. And Dan, we've been talking about your upbringing and music and teaching. And we were talking about just how to teach, but we've got a shot here of you actually teaching. It looks very glamorous where you're teaching.
Yeah.
Is this for a performance?
Yeah, so
rehearsal?
That's one of my first students, Holly, who is mid-performance right there, yeah.
Are you being the page turner or something?
I am being
there you go. Look
the
at that.
page turner.
I love it.
That's right. Trying to keep out of her way.
Oh, well, she gets the full focus there.
Exactly.
Here's another one of you teaching.
Yeah, that's our studio, yeah. That was today, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, there you go.
Beautiful student, Lisa.
Just to prove, I'm glad you changed your shirt.
Yeah, she's learning Somewhere Over the Rainbow, if memory serves.
Of course, with the rainbow-coloured...
I think that's a light above us that's red, green and blue.
Oh, no, on the music. It looks like it's
well,
highlighted.
because kids need colour. Absolutely.
Right. Well, that's something I've never considered with teaching. What a good idea. Okay, so you're a teacher, you've been performing back in the UK.
Yep.
Then you say, there's the Adelaide Fringe happening. I need to create a show for the Fringe. So how did this show that you've created actually begin?
All right, so we did a concert, a Pathways concert in 2019. That's the name of the music school.
Yep.
And we had this idea of using staff to support students. So, for example, we had a student sing "I'm a Believer," and we've got the teachers actually in the band, and she's the vocalist. And it absolutely brought the house down. And we did that for about 15 songs. And a parent came up to me at the end, and they said, "I don't mean I'm not speaking exaggerate. I'm not exaggerating. Trying to get my words out." He said, "But that was the best concert for kids that I've ever been to." And he said, "No, I've been to a lot." And I went, "Brilliant."
As many parents have to.
And I have sat through my fair share as well. And he said, "That's great. You're really changing lives." And then COVID hit, and we didn't know.
Oh, we've got a shot of that concert, haven't we?
We have got a shot of that concert. Yeah, there
This
it is,
one here.
2019. Yeah, so that is Christmas before COVID, and that's about half of the Pathways teachers and our choir at the time on stage.
Right.
Singing Love Shine a Light, which was the UK Eurovision Song Contest winning song.
Right.
So.
So this was sort of, in a way, the starting point, the embryo
Correct.
of what you're starting to create.
That's right, and then COVID wiped us. I think more emotionally than anything else. I think as musicians we all felt, and I'm talking really for my teaching team, felt that it might get taken away from us. The ability to make music our lifelong profession.
Definitely affected a lot of people in that way.
The arts, I think.
Because we all thought initially, this will be a couple of months, and then it was more than a couple of months, and then it was over a year.
That's right. And then it dragged on into 2021, and we were all wearing masks, and we were all frightened to get out to shows.
Well, fortunately, our fingers are crossed that 2023 will be a clear year and everything will go well.
Yeah, exactly. So we were all sick and tired of teaching on Zoom and going to shows.
Difficult to make that work, really, isn't
hard,
it?
yes.
Too many distractions.
A lot. Well, actually, look, I did some of my best ever lessons on Zoom, honestly, but harder for certain instruments. If you're a guitarist, it's tricky to demonstrate.
Difficult to teach singers, because, well, all those things. Everybody had a go at it. Some people benefited, particularly people, I guess, who couldn't come to you regularly.
Correct.
Any time couldn't come regularly.
Correct.
Like
and
if
now,
you're living way up in the bush or
that's
whatever.
right. And actually, we've got students now that come from all over Australia, which is awesome. It's
good for that.
opened
Yes,
possibilities.
good for that.
But we all sat down as a team, myself especially and my musical director, Jacob. We sat down and we went, right, we want to do something big. We need, as a teaching team, a project.
Got to have a result at the end, really.
Got to have a result at the end. And I think what we wanted to do was bridge the gap between professional and amateur. And the Fringe is the perfect spot for that. We're so lucky in Adelaide to be able to have the venues and the crowds that we get, and it's such an energetic.
We also
time.
need a type of venue for that as well, I guess, so that you
Correct.
can set everything up properly.
Correct, yeah. That's where the idea came from, and we were looking at shows and thinking, well, what can we do? And we looked at, getting the rights to individual musicals and things like that. And then actually it was Jacob that said, well, it would be really nice if we could get the best of what a Pathways concert used to be, all those best moments, and sort of homogenise it into one show. And I said, oh yeah, a little bit like walking down Broadway, you're getting these little threads of different musicals coming at you from all the theatres. And that was the idea for the show. It became a night on Broadway.
Right, okay. What always amuses me when people talk about Broadway, unless you've been there, there's so few theatres actually on Broadway. Oh, I want to go to Broadway, all the kids say. Well, that's nice, but what are you going to do?
It's a little like the West End would be better, I think, the name.
Yes, I agree.
But
Shaftesbury Avenue. Let's all go to Shaftesbury Avenue.
But it's got the cachet of the name, of course.
I know, but isn't it amazing how... It's like Hollywood, Hollywood, the suburb of Hollywood is this side of the mountain, but all the studios pretty much are on the other side of the mountain in the valley. Nothing like, it's not Hollywood at all.
Yeah, that's right.
And Bollywood the same. There's Bollywood all over India.
Yeah.
Not just where people think it is.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, yes. Yeah. Anyway, I guess it's a brand in itself, isn't it?
Correct, absolutely.
So shows you're going to be featuring are what?
Oh, many. Okay, you've caught me on the hop. So we're doing...
I thought you were sitting down.
Things like Les Mis, a show called Blondell that I was in, that you saw the picture of earlier. A great song called No Rhyme for Richard, which is just, Tim Rice at his lyrical best. We're doing songs from Hamilton, Phantom, Wicked, Hairspray, many more.
So you've remembered everything.
I've done well. That was my worst nightmare. Forget it.
Considering you're on in a minute, doing shows in a minute, I'm glad. Look, pulling a show together though is not the simplest thing in the world. It doesn't just happen. How long have you been planning this?
This is 9 months of actual rehearsing and planning for a good sort of 14, 15 months.
How many people in the show?
50, the cast of 50.
Oh, just a small group then.
Which is huge. But you've got to remember a lot of those are kids as well. And we've been working them incredibly hard.
But do you feel this is a good thing for them because they can see, I'm learning this for a specific reason?
So I don't mean to exaggerate, but it is genuinely changing lives. We're watching these kids and they are fantastic. I've got an eye for detail and an eye for excellence. And we, as I said, we work them hard and they are, they're absolutely pulling it out of the bag. Yeah.
So where do most of the performers that will be in the show, but where do they come from? Is this an area that you're living or is it all over?
It's all over. So we did auditions. The moniker of the business is music for everyone. So we were really keen on keeping that ethos within Viva, which is the production company. And so we opened auditions and absolutely anyone could come down and sing us anything, and then we worked with them on song selection based on what we could actually do and what we were not allowed to do and things like that.
Right. So is it a singing show or is it a musician's show or a combination of both?
It's a combination. So it is a theatrically set, cabaret style, but seated theatrical event. And it's about 2 hours long. Okay.
So getting into something like the Fringe for a first timer, did you find that challenging? We've talked about different shows over the years on this program, but we never really talk much about how long it takes to create something. Where does sort of the brain power come from? Is it an individual who's come up with a concept? Is it a whole bunch of people that have put something together? Because as a viewing audience, we come along and see something, But
Yeah.
we don't really, it flows over you and, oh, isn't that lovely? And I've forgotten that I've got a sore toe, or, I've got to make a payment to the bank or whatever. You forget all that for the time period the show is on.
Yep.
Then you go home and, oh, that was lovely. But then what happens to the people in the show? Where do they come from? What happens to them after the show? Do they go on to something else? All of those questions aren't really answered.
Correct.
So what sort of guidance are you giving the people that are heading into the show? How do you stimulate that sense of a planned accomplishment to come?
Well, that is a loaded question.
Yes, isn't it?
So the next step
just
for
thought of
us, the next step for us is that I think what we've got is pretty special. We've got an amazing team, and I know that every producer and director says the exact same thing. But this team is from 5 years of age into the 70s.
Well, see,
And
you
it's very
probably
unique.
answered the question in a very simple statement and using the word team.
Yeah.
Because everyone really does have to funnel all of their abilities into the show.
And
We've got to take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment just to talk a bit more to Dan about this show. And welcome back. Our guest has been Dan Sherwood. We've been talking about this show, which is called
An Evening on Broadway.
Okay, and this is on. You're in the first week of the Fringe, aren't you?
We are first weekend, so Friday the 17th, Saturday the 18th, Sunday the 19th of February.
Right. And where?
At Star Theatre.
Okay. Well, I wish you all the success with that, and
Thank you,
particularly for the cast of how many? 50.
50, yeah. It's going to be fantastic.
Goodness me. Oh, I hope you don't have to feed them.
There'll be a few pizzas, let me tell you.
I love it. And I think it's great that you're doing something like this, because this is really, for a lot of local companies, they don't really understand how to use the Fringe, but there's lots of different ways. It's to promote what you've got. It's just as a pure entertainment. It's to start something that's going to grow and move on, perhaps out of the state, out of the country eventually. So
And we're
somewhere
all
amongst
three.
all of these things, you may have the secret formula.
Oh, fingers crossed.
But you've got to do it first.
Correct. We've got to have fun.
You do. Has it been sleepless nights for you?
Yeah, it has, but it's been probably the most fun I've had on a musical project for a long time, and that's
Since
exciting.
you were a boy, when you had no responsibility but
Probably.
to get on and do it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's the other thing. For people that have been young performers and you just have the vision to create something, past that point.
They're my fondest memories, and
Yes.
my only hope is that my cast leave with them being their fondest
Well, you're
memories.
creating the same for others, yes.
Correct.
I absolutely understand that. Well, good luck with the show. Once
Thank you,
again, it's
Malcolm.
called...
It is called An Evening on Broadway, and it's in the Fringe Guide.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan, very much.
Thanks, Malcolm.
So, until next time on Our Time, we hope you enjoy the Adelaide Fringe. Get out and see something. Keep yourself nice until then, and while you're out doing it as well. See you soon. Bye.